slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past. And the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness. Hilarious, you think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you hide behind a fake exterior. Inferior, you know I'll always be a bit superior. Get off of me, this ain't no humble brag. I want you to hear words, you can say them back. I want you to feel free from the chains that last, and to believe in what you got, it was built to last, yeah.
Now that I've been put through, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Gonna learn the consequence of being incompetent. Mental health is confidence, dreams and some honestness. I'm not here to save the day, that's for you to take away. I could play a million mind games, but instead I say something not illogical, something that is topical. Rub it on and watch it go, make yourself unstoppable. Dreams are irresponsible, but they're always possible. If you just believe, you could be so remarkable.
Thoughts in my head, a collage and they spread. I'll be great one day, going off of my meds. No, I'm not giving up, no, I'm not giving in. I will make it to the top, taking off in the wind. I gotta make it, I'm saving every day to taste it. I'm patient, but my mind, it can hardly take it. I'm chasing a dream that I've had for several ages. A vacant, modern kingdom for the taking.
Now that I've been put through, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
Cruising in my lane fast, call it high speed. I've been working hard, yeah, I've been working nightly. If you think you'll win, ha, not fucking likely. I be taking shots, yeah, cold-blooded, icy. Watching numbers grow is what I call sightseeing. In the front row, run it up when they hype me. The following grows, they know how to ignite me. Call me CEO, I've been running shit right, see. And I ain't playing games, I create my own lane, making pleasure out of pain, turning losses into gains. I'm the boss, I'm making change. I've been rocking this exchange, popping off and risking things. Gonna make a fucking name, I just wanna be famous. But I don't want that cheap fame, no I'm not that vain. I just wanna be greatness. 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 Ain't no motherfucker in this world can do it like me. Open up your eyes and insert a little rising. You don't have to love me, you don't have to like me. Got enough love in myself, in my psyche. You should have the same in your brain nightly. If you wanna taste, bitch, you can fucking try me. If you wanna hate, bitch, you know where to find me. And if you're going hate, way, I'm going off every chance I get. I don't really take a loss, well, I'll admit. That's why I'll make it to the top, yeah, I commit. And no, I'm never getting lost, I get after it. Investing in my own stock, cause it's faster than any crypto hits go, let me spend. Everything that you see is something I invent, and it's only a percent. I'm gonna take shots, if I miss all, forget it. I'll take a fat loss just to learn all that's in it. I'm taking snapshots, learning how to fall and get it. I'm getting back up, always stand tall, don't sweat it. I never back up, I don't miss a thing or regret it. I'm always learning, you could call me academic. I'm always working, never been apathetic. Bad energy is like a poison, needs some antiseptic.
Ain't no motherfucker in this world can do it like me. Open up your mind and insert a little rising. You don't have to love me, you don't have to like me. Got enough love in myself and my psyche. You should entertain in your brain nightly. If you wanna take bitch, you can fucking try me. If you wanna hate bitch, you know where to find me. If you're going hate bitch, you can fucking fight me.
Ain't no motherfucker in this world can do it like me. Open up your eyes and insert a little rising. You don't have to love me, you don't have to like me. Got enough love in
Hey everyone, how are y'all? Wacky, Sonia, hey loves. How are you, Wacky? When you gonna move down here with me? We could be neighbors somewhere. I do have this streaming on both of my channels, my main channel and my backup. So if I'm talking to somebody and you don't see, they might be in the other chat. Can y'all hear me good? Oh, that's nice. Sunshine is always nice. It is. It feels good for the soul to be out in the sunshine, isn't it? I love having a good old tan, and I don't know, it just makes you feel good. Sun hits your skin, and Wacky, I think you're on my backup channel. That's okay. You can stay there. Cool. So have y'all heard about, I haven't covered the Idaho 4 in a while, and I kind of got out of it, because tragedy pimps get involved in shit, and it just turns me off on these cases. But, stuff's been coming out a little here and there, and I thought maybe I should start just catching up a little bit with the new stuff coming out. I'm not all about repeating all that old shit, but this case is very interesting to me. And it's came out recently. I'm a little behind and late to the game, but they found an ID in a sock or a glove or something in Kohberger's, one of his houses or something. And the ID belonged to one of the girls that lived in the Idaho 4 house. Y'all probably done heard this, and I'm just behind. We're just going to share a little bit of that, catch up a little bit. I'll drop the link too if anybody wants to come up and chat. And it ain't even going to be about the case. If you just want to come up and chit chat, Wacky, I'm going to get you up here one day. I'm going to get Jaded up here one day too with me. Yeah, he's sloppy. Yeah, he thought he'd get away with it. And more's I want to know who the ID is. There's fucking narcissists think they can get away with everything. I swear they do. It's how they are. They think the laws don't pertain to them and they can just do what they want to people. And it don't work like that. Okay, I'm going to get into playing a little bit of these clips and we can talk about it after and stuff. And here we go.
Let's turn now to news that broke last hour. Exclusive details related to the investigation of Bryan Kohberger, the suspect in the murder of those 4 University of Idaho students. Chris Cuomo reporting an identification connected to someone from the home in Moscow, Idaho. The murders took place was found during a search of one of Bryan Kohberger's residences. In addition to a supposed DNA found on a knife sheath at the scene, that could become the most significant piece of evidence tying Kohberger to the victims. And police sources also telling News Nation they have evidence it connects Kohberger to what they are viewing as cyber stalking of someone from that same home. Let's bring back in retired FBI agent and News Nation legal contributor Jennifer Coffindaffer. Thanks for coming back. Appreciate it. Let's take these one by one. If true, the ID seems like a huge piece of evidence.
It's very big. It's so powerful because now there is absolutely no explanation for why he would have an ID from somebody in that house. And recall, on the search warrant, number 35, from the house that was searched of his parents, it lists IDs in a glove in a box. not in a glove compartment, in a glove, in a box, in the house.
Right. So what kind of evidence might they have, do you think, on the cyber stalking side of this, and how significant is that?
It's significant to me because what it does is it shows the connection of stalking physically that we know about through the phone pings, 12 of them in and around that house. And now we have possible cyber stalking. Why do people stalk? They stalk because they feel mistreated, they feel persecuted, and that's the same reason they kill. So this is a direct correlation, I believe.
Yeah, and this is the sort of evidence that they can uncover in a whole variety of ways, right?
Absolutely. They've done a full digital analysis of all the phones, and specifically of his phone. There's going to be a treasure trove of information from those phones. We saw it in Murdaugh. We're going to see it in this case as well.
Phones, his computers, any place he had access to it, any place he might have logged in. Jennifer Coffindaffer, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
Here to help break down these developments is former FBI Special Agent Stuart Kaplan. Stuart, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you. Thank you, Natasha.
And so I do want to ask what your thoughts are around this ID connected with someone in that Moscow home in Idaho being found in Kohberger's property. How big of a deal is this?
Well, there are two explanations. I think the latter is he grabbed something on his way out in his twisted way or in his twisted mind, as more of a trophy type of thing to take with him, or the more sinister and the more concerning aspect, would he have possibly entered into this home at some earlier time and date and grabbed something unknown to any of the occupants of the house? And that is something that he had on his person or had in his possessions before the date of carrying out these murders.
How common is that kind of trophy behavior in killers?
Very, very common, especially when you are talking about someone who may be more leaning towards the serial type of killer. I know through my sources, they're working very hard now to make a determination as to whether or not Bryan Kohberger is responsible for other unsolved or cold case murders. So it is very common with respect to someone who has this type of fetish with respect to stalking these type of individuals and then carrying out these heinous acts to kind of retrieve something as a token of his dominance. The retrieval of someone's property is more of a dominance, in their twisted mind to say that I've won because I have something that belonged to you.
And let's talk more about that, because as you said, we are learning that Pennsylvania police are investigating Kohberger for possible involvement in other crimes. Is this common for high-profile murder suspects? And would you be surprised if something did turn up?
I'm not going to be surprised if something else turns up. I think what had always been a concern to the law enforcement community is the number of victims and the brutality in which these murders were carried out. I think it's just not consistent with someone who would have gotten up on some particular day for the first time and then decided to carry out a murder. This person obviously had to have had some sort of planning and plotting and some sort of mental defect, certainly at the time carrying out this type of horrific, quadruple homicide. And I think the law enforcement community, the investigation has really ironically taken off and has accelerated since the date of the apprehension. Now, law enforcement in connection with this case did an incredible job with respect to leading up to the apprehension of Bryan Kohberger, but it has really, from my sources, accelerated with respect to making a determination as to whether or not he may have been responsible for other murders closer to where he resided with his parents.
And we are also learning that Kohberger allegedly cyberstalked one of the victims from the Moscow, Idaho home. And of course, they're looking at his phones, looking at potentially images of the victims that he had stored on his phone. Help explain to us, because, Kohberger had training in this area. If he did commit this crime, why would he keep a trophy or an ID that clearly connects him to one of the victims? Why would he not wipe his phone of images of the people that he allegedly killed?
Well, to your last point, the technology has advanced, and certainly in the technology with respect to the FBI and on the level of technology that has been developed by the FBI and in partnership with various technology companies, it is almost virtually impossible to thoroughly scrub and delete any of your social media platforms, whether it's photographs, text messages, Snapchat, or otherwise. And that's just the reality. The technology that law enforcement now has is able to dive back in and be able to retrieve certain footprints that will then be able to reveal what you thought at the time you deleted, whether it's a text message, a photograph, or some other form of communication. And I think that given that the FBI has been able to assist local and state law enforcement in this particular case, has been a treasure trove to open up and expand the breadth of this investigation. Now, with respect to whether or not Bryan Kohberger, I think his arrogance, I think there's a obvious degree of arrogance that this defendant maintains and has with respect to thinking that he's better and dominant of those people. I think that's his modus operandi, where he has a dominance feeling that he is stronger and more powerful and smarter. But ultimately, I think it showed that he was not stronger or more powerful or smarter because law enforcement quickly was right on the heels and obviously led to his apprehension. And I think ultimately, this thing is going to explode with respect to potentially other crimes being charged against him with respect to holding him responsible for other victims.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe.
Okay, now it was mentioned in there about Bryan having possible connections to other killings or something. And I got some things too. I'm going to play on that because that's kind of interesting because I don't know. I've always felt that this wasn't his first time doing something stupid, or you know what I mean? But we will go and listen to those. And yeah, and I think he did have the ID before that. And I think it's Maddie. I think Maddie was the target. I don't know. I just feel it was Maddie because Kaylee wasn't supposed to be there. He probably wasn't expecting Ethan to be there that late, you know, and I don't know. I'm ready for this hearing. When they start doing the trial and stuff on this, we will play that, go with that. But here's some stuff on him maybe being a possible other case.
News Nation has exclusively learned that Pennsylvania authorities are investigating Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger for his potential connection to other unsolved killings. This revelation broke just last night, so here to fill us in is senior national correspondent at News Nation, Brian Entin. Great to see you, Brian. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Please elaborate. What is this latest news that authorities are interested in Kohberger potentially having been involved in murders, I would gather, previous to what happened in Idaho?
Yeah, previous to what happened in Idaho, we don't have a ton of detail, but we have confirmed that they are looking into Kohberger for at least 2 murders that happened in Pennsylvania. We don't know if they've, made significant headway in connecting him to those homicides. We just know that they were and are possibly still looking into a possible connection.
And refresh our memories, he was in Pennsylvania at some point prior to coming to the campus in Idaho. He was a student there. Can you refresh us of the timeline?
Yeah, so he grew up in Pennsylvania. He went to high school in Pennsylvania. He went to college and got his master's in Pennsylvania. So he lived most of his life in Pennsylvania. He had just moved out to Washington State, which, right next to University of Idaho, where the murders happened, pretty recently. So most of his life was spent out in Pennsylvania. He got his master's at DeSales University. So he was there for quite a bit of time during his adult life.
So, Brian, I just wanted to ask a little bit about this individual. He's obviously an educated person. Is there anything in his profile that we know of that would lead people to believe that perhaps he would be a serial killer? Was there something strange about him in his upbringing that would lead people to potentially believe that he would be this guy?
Well, we've talked to a lot of people who knew him while he was growing up, who say, that he was quiet, that he was reserved, that he didn't have a lot of friends, that he never really had a girlfriend, and that he was kind of a loner. He was bullied at one point, and overweight. In terms of any evidence that would show that he's committed a serial killing before, we haven't come across any hard evidence. Of course, he's just accused at this point. But I mean, if he is responsible for these murders in Idaho, a lot of times, it's not someone's first time. And he's been studying criminology for so long. He got his master's in criminology. He was now getting his PhD in criminology. So he was very familiar with that field.
I mean, that's just very, very disturbing because it, raises the possibility, I guess, that he had gotten away with some other crime or murder for a very long period of time. So obviously, after what happened at Idaho, it was, we were still kind of marveling at how long it took authorities to, find and arrest a suspect. But still, that was a matter of, of a few weeks versus this. It could have been a much longer period of time in which he had eluded authorities.
Yeah, it could have been. And I don't want to blow it out of proportion because it's not totally unusual for authorities to go back through cold cases and unsolved murders. If you have a situation like this and try to see, is it possible that, that someone we've now caught could be connected. So I think that's what's happening right now behind the scenes. And again, we don't know of any specific evidence at this point connecting him to certain murders. We just know that they are investigating and they are trying to see if those connections exist.
And a connection to, and I know it hasn't really been explained yet, but to multiple murders, not just one specific case. Has that been explained yet? Yeah,
it's our understanding at least 2 potential unsolved murders in Pennsylvania.
Is there any reason that he would have made that trip or at least moved cross country from Pennsylvania to Washington? And is it possible that he was trying to elude authorities by making the move cross country?
I don't think that's the reason. I mean, he moved out to Washington State to get his PhD in criminology, where he was currently enrolled in getting his PhD out there. He had applied to the program out there and been accepted, and he was starting the process. He was, a TA. He was teaching classes out there. So, I don't think he was necessarily trying to run away from anything. I think that's just where he got into school, to get his PhD.
Do we have any updates on how well he knew the victims in Idaho? I think last when I checked in on this, there was more evidence that he'd been, contacting them on Instagram. Do we know more about, whether he'd had interactions with them in person, or more than just the one victim who he had continuously kind of tried to contact on social media? What's the state of that understanding, or why he picked them, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't know a lot more. There are the reports that he messaged several of the victims, and that they found those messages on his cell phone, and that they went into sort of like the unread folder on the victim's cell phone. So like if you get a message from someone you don't know and you're not friends with, it will go into this folder where you may not even see it. Beyond that, we don't know much more. The other new reporting that we just confirmed last night, though, which is kind of interesting with Kohberger, is you may remember the University of Idaho was able to obtain the house where the murders happened. The homeowner gave the house up to the University of Idaho, and that the university planned to tear it down. And they were going to do that very, very soon, just within the next couple of weeks. They are now not going to do that right away. There's been some concern from the families saying, hey, what if the jury wants to tour the house? We don't think it's a good idea to tear it down. So now the university is going out to the prosecution and the defense to see if they have any objections to the house being torn down. One side likely will. And then the university says they're going to go to the judge and let the judge make a ruling. So that's kind of interesting, because we thought the house was going to be torn down very, very soon, and now that's not going to happen.
That is very interesting. I also know that Kohberger, will be eligible for the death penalty. Have the families given any indication how they, feel about that kind of issue?
So the Gonzalez family has alluded to the fact that they would be pro-death penalty. The other families haven't commented on it at this point. It's tricky right now for the families because there's this gag order in place, and it doesn't specifically say they can't talk, but it sort of does at the same time. It's kind of like a weird gray area. So they're not really commenting on a lot of those questions. But in Idaho, the governor just signed a new law that they'll now have a firing squad as an option for the death penalty in Idaho. It's hard to get the drugs right now for lethal injection, and so they've had to put off some executions in the past. So now, if the drugs aren't available, which oftentimes they will actually have a firing squad in Idaho. So that could be a possibility for Kohberger if it gets to that point.
Which I know probably sounds grisly to a lot of people. Although I've heard arguments that a firing squad is a more immediate way to go out than the drug combination, where people might be in a state of pain and they might actually survive it, and it's not nearly as humane as people have been led to believe. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.
Misty Maris, trial attorney and legal analyst. So this isn't unusual, right? That you start to open up the possibility box that somebody capable of this gruesome murder could have been capable of similar things before in his home state or elsewhere, right? Anything strange here?
Yes, absolutely, Marty, but I think it actually even goes a bit further. So first of all, many people opined when this terrible tragedy happened that this could not have been the perpetrator's first time. Remember, this was so meticulous in the way that it was executed. Very little evidence being left behind. All we have is that knife sheath. Some say that could have been a signature move, leaving behind an item in order to really say, I did this, without actually identifying yourself. That's something that we see with people who commit multiple murders. We've seen it with serial killers, but that's one piece of it. So the brutality of killing 4 people in this meticulous way leads investigators down this path of, could this have been the first time somebody did this? Then we have that idea of modus operandi, leaving behind a signature like that knife sheath. But I think we can take it a step further. Because remember, think about everything that's been confiscated in the course of collecting evidence. Digital footprint, computers, now we have DNA. My question is, there something more than just speculation that this person could have committed other crimes? Is there something linking Kohberger that's been gathered in the course of the investigation that links him to a victim in an unsolved crime? Now, we don't know yet, but there are a lot of different avenues for investigators to pursue, given where we are in the Idaho case.
Okay, so you just brought up two questions for me immediately. I think, first of all, would not that be as simple as DNA? You've got an unsolved case, you're collecting DNA, now you have his, you cross-reference?
Well, it could be, but remember, it depends on the age of the case, right? We don't know which unsolved cases are potentially being investigated and with a connection to Kohberger. So could they be cases that do not involve DNA? Are they cases with just circumstantial evidence themselves? I would opine, and this is just based on an educated guess of what's going on here, that it doesn't seem like in some of these unsolved cases there is rock solid DNA, or they probably wouldn't be unsolved, right? So there may be other factors that are leading investigators to look at Kohberger. DNA might be one, but there could be other circumstantial cases that are similar in execution to the Idaho case.
And when you talk about a signature type crime, I mean, some would say it was sloppy to leave the knife sheath behind. Are you suggesting that maybe it was an intentional thing?
I don't know, but yeah, because many have said that the knife that's actually used may have not even fit in the knife sheath. So was this knife sheath left behind for the purpose of, and look, this is something that we've seen in other cases, and that's why I'm suggesting it's a possibility here that the knife sheath that was left behind strategically. Think about somebody who planned something so meticulously to leave no DNA, to leave very little evidence other than maybe a footprint, but then leaves this one very obvious item behind. It doesn't make sense. So perhaps that was more intentional, and maybe that's something that's ringing a bell with law enforcement in Pennsylvania with respect to other unsolved crimes. Again, totally speculative, Marnie, but these are the avenues I would expect investigators to be thinking about as they potentially link him to other unsolved crimes in Pennsylvania.
Right, and until this case goes to trial, there's a lot we don't know, a lot of evidence we don't have yet. We were just showing the house, Misty, on the screen. Demolition of that house where the murders took place was set to happen. That is now in question. The university was going to tear it down. The family members of the victims then stepped in and said they're not okay with that until after the trial. Here's what's interesting about all of this, and I want to attribute this to Ashley Banfield, who had great reporting on it last night. The university is now asking the judge to decide. Evidence may be an issue here. The jury may want to see that crime scene. What's in play at this point?
I would be highly, highly concerned about this house being torn down during the course of this trial, both from the prosecution and perspective, from the prosecution perspective and the defense perspective. Marnie, keep in mind, the house is actually a critical piece of evidence. We're talking about several different floors where the murders occurred. All of that, the timeline, how each individual person was killed, and the what floor, the whole timeline and logistics of how that occurred is going to be central to the case from both the prosecution and the defense perspective. So if I were the judge, I would be strongly weighing the fact that there could be a potential issue, appellate issue even, of having a critical piece of evidence, this house, destroyed before we get into that courtroom and before we get to trial. I think it would be a terrible decision to tear it down, something I would highly contest on both sides, both prosecution and defense.
Right. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you wonder, what's the harm in waiting, right? I mean, if there is something that can be gathered there, you hold off on it. Misty Maris, as always, thank you. What a tragic case. And we're just beginning to learn how gruesome it really was. Thank you for watching. Go to NewsNation now.
See, I don't think they should tear that house down yet. Why would you do that before the trial and stuff? You never know what you need to go back and look at, And like, it bothers me when there's these open murder cases. For instance, like Cassie Carley, that one got my heart, and I followed it. And they cremated her. Her autopsy come back undetermined. They couldn't find a reason that she died. And it's like, if they had not cremated her, they could have, went back. I don't know. I just don't. They need to wait until the cases are over and solved and closed and stuff before they destroy stuff like that. I mean, yeah. Okay, and let's see here. I'm going to go over here, talk more about the ID.
Kohberger, accused of killing Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonsalves in November. Well, sources now telling News Nation an ID belonging to one of them was found in Kohberger's car. And meanwhile,
yes, Wack, like in the Murdaugh trial, the jurors went to the house. You know what I'm saying? Or wherever they got killed at. The jurors went there and got to look for themselves. That's why they need to wait on that. Yes.
Authorities in Pennsylvania are looking into Kohberger's possible involvement in other killings. Here to help me unpack the latest developments is former CIA officer and FBI special agent Tracy Walder. Tracy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
And if Kohberger is guilty of this crime that he's accused of and went through so many steps to avoid being caught, like wearing gloves while going out, etc., why would he keep an ID of one of the victims that could so easily be tied back to him?
Sure. Well, obviously his involvement in these crimes is alleged at this point. And, if he kept sort of a souvenir, really it points to just that, that he, for his ego purposes, wanted to keep a souvenir of this crime, wanted to keep a souvenir of what he believed that he had successfully done. And I always think a lot of times with criminals that I've seen, it's always their ego that gets them in the end. I do think that he was very confident in what he had done. And I believe that he felt he hadn't left any evidence behind, but it's always their ego that's their undoing. And I believed he wanted a trophy, if you will, of the crime that he had committed.
How would his defense defend him having a victim's ID in his possession? What would the explanation for that be?
So that's going to be the tough one in this case. I think one of the things I've always felt about the knife sheath, although it's frustrating, one thing a defense attorney could say is that it was a party house. There were people that came in and out. People probably had knives on them at some point. It's Idaho. And so that was one way they could have explained it. But it's going to be very difficult for a defense attorney to explain how potentially a victim's ID ended up in his vehicle where victims were not known to have been. I think that's going to be the part where they're going to really have a hard time here. And that's why I believe this could be potentially more damaging to him than the discovery of the knife sheath.
I appreciate that. Let's talk about this because the ID has been called a smoking ID in headlines. Do you think that this is the most significant piece of evidence yet and that prosecutors will be able to use this?
I do. I've always felt, and I think I said on this show that I have felt that the car was really kind of the keys to the kingdom, if you will, in this case. He was definitely going to leave something, whether it was himself or part of the victims, behind in the car. And if this is indeed the case, then he left the ID of one of the victims. And again, this is all alleged, but if so, it could really tell us who his target was allegedly in the committing of this crime. And so, I think that this really could be a smoking gun piece of evidence for him.
I appreciate that. And Jennifer Coffendorfer spoke with News Nation's Chris Cuomo just this week on how Pennsylvania authorities are looking into Kohberger's possible connection with other crimes. Let's listen to that quickly together.
I think it is a signature type crime. I mean, this is a vicious crime with a K-bar knife. It's unusual. It was a co-ed on campus. So if they're looking at something very specific that's unsolved with these parameters, they're probably looking in the right direction.
Do you agree with Jennifer here that this is a signature type crime and maybe connected to other cold cases? Or does your instinct say that Kohberger, this was likely a one-off for him?
I'm not sure. And I know that that's not very helpful in this case. But one of the things that investigators do have at their disposal now, which is going to be very helpful to them, is something called VICAP, which is the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And that is a database where you can run things like MOs, weapons used, gender of the person committing the crime through that and sort of build a pattern. And what they can do is then go out from there and look at other crimes that were committed in Pennsylvania. I think the bigger issue here and the bigger thing in regards to his signature is potentially that trophy that we just talked about, allegedly that ID that was left over. I think that's going to be key to see if he had others on him and that those could be connected to other crimes. I think that's a bigger signature than using a K-bar knife.
I appreciate that insight. If Kohberger is convicted, how likely is it, do you think, that he will receive the death penalty?
That's actually a great question. And my own criminal justice students have actually asked me that multiple times. I think it's highly likely if he is convicted in this case. I mean, we know that Idaho just passed the use of the firing squad in their state if the lethal injection drug is not available. I do believe that he is looking at the death penalty in this case. If he is convicted, this is a quadruple homicide that was clearly premeditated, and it would be a justified use of the death penalty.
All right, Tracy Walder, always appreciate the context and time. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
What's up, everybody? Happy Good Friday. You're probably watching this Friday night. Pete and I have recorded the first couple episodes of the podcast. We're looking forward to that. We dropped the trailer earlier today. But a lot of you, since the Kohberger update yesterday, have sent me yet another breaking news story from News Nation with more details connecting Bryan Kohberger to the Idaho 4 victims. I have not watched this clip together, or I've not watched this clip on my own. I figured we could watch it together. It's only about 5 minutes long, and see if these are any serious new details with new evidence that can connect him to this case. Is it a nothing burger? Is it just unconfirmed leaks? Because there is a gag order. So I don't know how they would. Here's what I've been told, right? And here's what the messages are saying on Instagram and Twitter, by the way, at Dragos Law. That's where you all send me these things where I see them. And if enough of you send them, we're going to see the bat signal in the sky and come and do a video. But everybody's saying One of the IDs of the victims was found in his house. There's proof of cyber stalking. We've heard, inklings that he followed some of their social media pages. Does it rise to the level of cyber stalking? What new details do they have? Did they confirm an ID of one of the victims? That would be interesting, right? Because of the gag order, how are they getting this confirmation? So if you guys are still interested in this, which I think you are, because I'm still getting a lot of messages and questions about it, hit that like button, subscribe to our page if you haven't already, because I like to keep the same people around and new people come in and give us their viewpoint on this. A lot of locals, a lot of people with different backgrounds. We have criminologists, law enforcement, lawyers, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health counselors, all sorts of people that come in and give their opinion, or just people that know someone that's been accused of a crime, or know someone that suffers through something, or know someone that's been a victim or has been a victim themselves, right? And all those different perspectives are really helpful and important to this channel. So I appreciate everybody that joins the discussion, gets in the comments, gets in the chat, and subscribes to our page. So let's get to it. Let's hear what Chris Cuomo has to say about Bryan Kohberger and what new details we know.
Tonight, we have another exclusive set of details, and they go to two aspects. One, evidence of what was found in the places where he lived or he inhabited, okay, that may connect him to one of the victims. An ID was found connected to someone from the home in Moscow, Idaho.
An ID was found that connected him to some, and I think Chris Cuomo chooses his words carefully in these because he says where he inhabited or lived, and then an ID that connected him to someone in the home of Moscow, Idaho, the victim. It doesn't say he's connected to the victim. It doesn't say it's a victim's ID. So I'm interested to hear what that is. And what does it prove? Well, at the very least, it proves maybe he has some kind of connection with somebody in that house. Even if it's not one of the victims, I think that could be this could be huge evidence, obviously. And I'm interested to hear where he got this information. So let's keep listening.
It was found during one of the searches of Kohberger's residences, plural. So what does that mean? Well, either they found it in Washington, where he was just outside Moscow, Idaho, or in Pennsylvania. Police also believe they have evidence that could connect Kohberger to what they are viewing as cyber stalking of someone from the Moscow residence.
And they keep calling it the Moscow residence, not one of the victims. So was he cyber stalking somebody else? And what new evidence is this? Because I thought, again, a lot of it was leaks, but maybe now we're hearing leaks of they're investigating his computers, his cell phones, his internet search history. Maybe they're getting a lot more information and he was cyber stalking them. Now, the definition of cyber stalking can actually be kind of vague and just going to their sites all the time and always following them and looking at every picture. Potentially somebody could make the allegation of cyber stalking, although that would probably never get you convicted of it without any other steps taken or without the victim actually knowing that you're stalking them, right? But let's keep listening to what they have.
We've reached out to the police. Due to the gag order, they can't confirm this information. But does this answer two questions?
We know that they cannot confirm that they have, in fact, gotten this information from the search or from what they have. So because the gag order, if the police can't confirm it, then where are they getting this information? And should we be confident in it, that it is legit? By the way, I wanted to read the specific definition of cyber stalking so you can understand what I meant, that just because you're going to somebody's page doesn't mean it's cyber stalking, right? And even if you message them, it doesn't mean you're cyber stalking. Cyber stalking is the repeated use of electronic communications to harass or frighten someone. For example, sending threatening emails or threatening messages or grotesque messages or messages where you're, coming on to someone over and over again to the level that it does frighten them or harass them. They ask you to stop. Unanswered messages usually is not cyber stalking. Telling a girl you like them, asking them out on a date, liking all of their pictures, usually not cyber stalking. But if we want hyperbole and we have this information that he was constantly going on one of their pages, and we're really speculating here, liking all of them, sending them messages and they never respond, you can call it cyber stalking, but in reality, it's probably not. It's probably a dude trying to hit on a girl, And again, we talked about this before, that when the report came out about messages he was sending them, and none of them were threatening, none of them were even that weird. It was like, hey, how are you? Or even if he got rejected by her, we talked about how many dudes get rejected by girls every single day. We don't call that cyber stalking, and we don't call that a precursor to committing a crime like this.
Is it a smoking gun? I never really understand what that means. Obviously, is it the murder weapon?
Smoking gun means, just in case anybody else has trouble with this, we have a shooter, right? And after you fire the bullet, there's smoke that comes out of the gun. That's how you prove that the bullet was shot, smoke coming out of the gun. That's the smoking gun, the gun that fired the bullet, to prove the case. That's the smoking gun analogy.
Weapon, was it? No. But does it connect him to a group of people he had no business to be familiar with? And does it imply?
Gosh, I didn't realize I was going to be stopping it so much. Sorry if that's annoying you. Does he have a connection to people he had no business being connected to? So again, we've completely thrown out the idea or possibility that he was friends with one of them. And I realize that people in their lives say they never knew Bryan Kohberger, never met him, didn't know they were friends. I promise you, I had hundreds of friends in college that my parents didn't know and that my other friends didn't know, because one friend was friend from biology class. Another one was a friend from the gym or from intramural football or from, whatever, law school. Not everybody knows every single person you hang out with. So the fact that they follow him on social media, I mean, listen, all the ladies sliding into the DMs, we didn't have that back then when I was in college. We did have Facebook and that was starting. And I was sliding in some instant messages and people were sliding into my instant messages. But it's not like every single one of my friends knew every single person that followed me on Facebook or messaged me or whatever. So why do we say he has no business knowing these people? Now, having their ID in a glove, hidden in a box, which is what somebody told me on instant message on a DM. Now that could be different. That is very different. You shouldn't have somebody else's ID hidden in a glove, hidden in a box. So we'll see if we get there. But just having no business being connected to college students when you're a graduate student, I don't know. I should have no business being connected to 4 students in Idaho, I guess. But I don't know about him. I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit of a press.
That Kohberger may have had more people on his list, and that may be why they're investigating him, to see if they can connect him to any other situations. Let's bring in retired FBI agent and News Nation legal contributor Jennifer Coffindaffer and high-profile trial attorney Mark Garagos. To both of your reckonings, you're familiar with the reporting and the sourcing on this. I basically have it right, yes? Nods of the head is enough? Okay, so from the investigative side, look, Garagos hates doing anything that's favorable to me. You see that? Even nodding his head. He didn't really want to. He was fighting it. So from the investigative side, Jennifer Coffindaffer, let's start with you. You find ID from one of the victims in a place that was controlled, inhabited by Kohberger.
That's bad.
Let's start with that. How big a deal?
It's a big deal. That is a smoking license, just like the sheath was a smoking.
That is a smoking license. It's like, yeah, that's not good. Is it a trophy? Is it something for him to remember them by? Obviously, that's not good. That is very damning evidence for Bryan Kohberger if they did, in fact, find the victim's ID at his place. Like, that's going to be near impossible to get around, in my opinion.
Sheath found next to Maddie with his DNA on that clasp. It's the same thing in this situation. Why would he have an ID related to one of those people from that house? And remember, we know that identifications were recovered from the glove box, and that was at the Pennsylvania search warrant. So interesting. We always wonder.
So that she says the ID was found in his glove box. Okay.
What were those identifications that they referred to?
What's the counter, Mark?
Well, look, the counter is we don't know if it's true yet. I think
that's a big one, right? That we lawyers always have to burst bubbles because it's like, well, are we just talking to talk, or is this real? Like, is this a real new report of new evidence? And he's right. It's like, well, first off, is it real? Let's start with that.
I think part of the problem is when you put a gag order on stuff like this and you don't have a way for people to respond, you get us doing what we're doing now. I mean, I would much rather find out if in fact this is true. I would want to find out, number 2, where it was found precisely, and I would want to know who it's of. And if you get if you assume all of those things are true, then I don't disagree with Coffindaffer. It's a bad fact.
The idea that they have, what are they talking about, you think, Jennifer, in the universe of we have evidence that we believe shows that there was cyber stalking of him, of somebody else, either in that house or elsewhere? What?
All right. So I think I know what this is. I think they're reading through these documents, again, that were unsealed, the hundreds of pages, and they're trying to pick apart little things and make them into more than what they are. Because those documents did say that IDs were gathered, but they have added the part. And again, I'm not saying they're adding anything. My guess is they're getting this information given to them from someone. But now we're saying it's an ID from someone in that house. Not a victim necessarily, but someone in that house, which is much different than just an ID. Or if it's an ID from some other unsolved case, also important, right? But this evidence of cyber stalking, again, I think goes back to what we already know, that he was messaging them and maybe following them. But I'd be interested to know if people think you can really cyber stalk someone if they don't even know that you're cyber stalking them. Are you harassing them? I mean, I guess you can threaten them without them knowing that they're threatened. I guess based on your words, like objectively, certain words are threatening. But that's just, to me, it's weird. Like, how are we gonna prove this at this point? But let's hear what she has to say.
Kind of things might they be talking about?
Well, again, to Garagos's point, if that's true, why do people stalk? They stalk because they're feeling persecuted, and this is a way that they can exact their revenge. The same reason why people commit these types of heinous murders. All it means is pursuing stealthily. So this would line up completely with the crime he is accused of committing.
And by
am
the
I
way,
wrong, Mark?
it fits
Go ahead.
right in. It fits right in with Jennifer's theory from last night too. So she's really building quite a true crime manifesto here.
Exactly. Once they have a theory, right? Stuff gets put into it, gets added to it. They continue to build, they continue to stack. And that's what's happening, right? They're going to make it fit into this box. Anything they can, they're going to make it sound, oh yeah, that's right in with our theory. Just like he's saying, build the manifesto.
I can't wait for the book.
Yeah,
I'm going to need her on the podcast. The idea of is it fair to argue, Counselor, at this point, even if both of these things are true, I'm more worried about the ID being in something of his control or possession than I am of the cyber stalking, because you could be into somebody and and looking at him a little bit too closely for somebody.
That's not cyber stalking, though. That's why I read the definition, right? That is not cyber stalking. Liking someone, following them, looking at their pictures, liking their pictures is not cyber stalking.
Else's comfort, but it doesn't mean you killed them.
That's exactly right. Because if you've got something, I'm going to guess, and Jennifer, you can slap me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that she would then say, look, if Pennsylvania turns out that they find things and he's connected to other crimes, this is what serial killers do. They have trophies. They take a trophy, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
This is like a true crime, I don't know, to exponential levels. So that is what the argument would be. And that's I'll give you this. If any of this is true, it's a very difficult hurdle for the defense.
Hey,
Again, so, I mean, these new reports, to me, they're unsubstantiated. We don't know if they're true. And there are a million different explanations, some of which will make them relevant to the case and prove guilt potentially. Other explanations that would be totally innocent or be like, it was an ID of someone that we don't know who it is. Is that weird? Yes. But that's not coming in at trial. If he has John Smith's ID in his glove box, that's not coming in this trial. If John Smith, of course, is not a missing person or part of another unsolved mystery or something like that. So it could be totally irrelevant to this. And also, if I was his lawyer and he liked a bunch of her pictures and followed her or whatever, one of the victims, I would go through and see how many females he followed and liked their pictures. So if anything happened to any of them, as now Bryan Kohberger, or I'd go even better probably and go to the victim's Instagram or whatever and see how many guys follow her and how many guys like all of her pictures. Are all of them suspects? Now, of course, you stack up the DNA on the sheath and all the extra things that connect Bryan Kohberger to this. I get it. But these individual things are not necessarily.
You know, I get what he's saying too here about stalking and stuff, but I don't believe in coincidences. There's too many things that add up that's facts toward Kohberger. You know what I mean? Cyber stalking, yeah. But you know, if you're sitting there and you're stalking somebody's social medias and stuff and they don't know it and you're like obsessed stuff, that's still some form of stalking, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of creepy. I don't know. Stalking's stalking to me. I mean, 'cause usually if you're stalking somebody, it's not for good reasons. Hey, Squid, bro. I don't know if you're still here. Yeah, creepy. I agree, Star Mama. Absolutely. Yeah. Just everything about him, man. It's like he was fucking obsessed over one of them girls. I believe it was Maddie, but it could be Maddie or Kaylee. One of them two. I say Maddie, though. Oh, hey, Squid. There you are. I gave you more powers. I don't know if you noticed that. I mean, we usually don't need it here, but in case it gets out of control and you need to slow the chat down or put it on subs only or whatever, I try not to have any bullshit where we got to do that. But all right, let's finish listening.
Necessarily smoking guns, as they're saying, but let's wait and see. All right, let's wait and see. Like we said a bunch of times, a bunch of you sent this to me. Figured we talk about it, and it's a good transition into more stuff like this is going to come out in the podcast where we talk about inadmissible evidence, conspiracy theories, what people are saying, unsubstantiated claims. We're going to save most of that for the podcast. So in the future, most of that's going to be on the podcast because we're going to try to stick to the facts on here. We're going to stick to what's coming into trial breakdowns, case breakdowns, reading probable cause affidavits, things like that. But so many of you have questions like this. I thought it was kind of a cool transition as next week we begin our new podcast, Opening the Door, with myself and Pete Sardis. So thanks for joining me tonight. Hit that like button. Hope everybody has a wonderful Easter and a great weekend, and we'll be back next week. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to The Lawyer You Know podcast. Each case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip. And these links I just mentioned are included in the description below.
A new theory tonight in the University of Idaho homicides, and it may provide new insight into Bryan Kohberger's mindset and possible motive. Kohberger, who was arrested in December and charged with the deaths of 4 students, may have come across his alleged victims at a much earlier date than first thought. More than a few weeks, more than a few months, more than a year. 2 weeks before the murders, Kohberger reportedly sent a series of messages to one of the victims on Instagram, according to People magazine, which is what many thought was the earliest contact he had with the victims. The recent court documents show authorities submitted several search warrants to social media companies, which they...
Where do you all think that he knew one of the victims from? What's your thoughts? What would you say his encounter with when he first with the victim that he went after? I think it was a Mad Greek restaurant because he's vegan. He's known to go there. That was proven as facts. So Maddie or Xana, but I say Maddie, but what do y'all think? How do y'all think he came in contact with his victim? And yep, wacky me too, Mad Greek. I agree. I believe that's it. Because I think they worked there a while. Maddie, at least like a couple years, I think, or something. So I can't wait till more comes out on this. I bet there's more to this that's going to blow our fucking mind. Because look at the creepy shit he's already done that we know, that they're telling us. Crazy, crazy.
Which date back to January 2021. That would put us back nearly 2 years before the murders. In a tweet this weekend, former FBI agent and News Nation contributor Jennifer Coffendaffer said, "Interesting how far the search warrants went back in time. Why January 2021? Did Bryan Kohberger somehow meet Kaylee or Maddie on a possible school visit early on? What made Kohberger choose Washington State University? Did Kohberger have a nexus with his victims sooner than we thought?" Could also be that they're just trying to make sure they don't miss anything. But let's ask the person who said it, former FBI agent, News Nation contributor, Jennifer Coffendaffer. Thanks very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so take me through this. Your theory is that they're asking about January 2021, not just to be inclusive, but because they may...
Frankie, hey, love. Whenever you're a law enforcement officer and you're meeting with your prosecutor and you're putting together these search warrant packages and subpoenas that we haven't even seen, you very specifically outline the date range that you want. And you have to have a reason for wanting this date range. I think it's very interesting. It specifically tunes into TikTok, Tinder, and then also Google. And it also is very specific to particular people. Ethan is not even considered in these particular set of warrants. And so I think that gives us some clues. It tells us that law enforcement believes possibly that they had a connection well prior to the time frame we thought. And that could either be through social media or through physically meeting them on a visit there.
And you think that it's possible that he may have chosen Washington State University to get his degree or to study because of some sort of relationship connection to the victims?
I think it's possible. Certainly law enforcement is going to be looking in every direction, including that direction. Could that have led him to choose this university clear across the country from Pennsylvania, where he had previously attended for his undergraduate and his master's degree? What took him there? That has to be at least considered. And when you look at this time frame they chose, I think that gives us a pointer as a possibility.
And the search warrants call for E11 all activity logs of the accounts, including who the account followed and unfollowed, location data, and messages sent or received from the account. So should we expect that all of that information will be turned over?
Oh, yes, it'll be turned over. And another reason why law enforcement likes to limit their date range to what is pertinent and what they believe could lead something in their investigation that would be important is you don't want to go over, all of this information going back too far in time. It is so much to look at. If you just see this document dump, they call it, or documents that you see, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages long. Imagine what the returns look like. It's going to be thousands of pages long. So there was a reason that they put in these specific parameters.
Jennifer, thank you very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
What's going on, guys? Hope everybody's having a great day. Please do me a favor, smash that like button. And if you get anything from the content, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot, and I really will appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to watch this guy here. He talks about the possibility of being Dylan's ID. This is a pretty cool dude. His channel's called Southern Logic. And he's not about the bullshit, in my opinion. He's straightforward and tells it like it is. But we're going to listen to what he has to say. And if Ahmad could get his link for me, Southern Logic, that's his channel name, and drop it, if you don't mind, on both the channels it's running, please. Because I follow this dude and watch a lot of his stuff. He was doing the Kylie case too. But yeah, let's listen in.
Appreciate it. Also, I'd like to say Happy Easter today. Happy Easter. I hope everybody finds the prize egg, right? So let's jump into this. So we've had a drought of information with the Idaho 4 case. There hasn't been much coming out. Ever since they started releasing warrants and reports and what they were looking for, everybody dug into that and tried to make content out of that, right? And hey, I'm not hating on them. Do what you got to do. If this is your job, I understand. This is not my job. So that's why I haven't made a crap ton of videos on things that I don't necessarily believe in. I only get interested in things that make sense to me, that I can really go into. And just, I get into conspiracies a lot, but just any old thing, I can't fall in. I can't fall in line with that. I can't go in and say, oh, well, they searched for this, so this means this. It's just like with the information coming out about how Bryan Kohberger was being looked at by Pennsylvania police for other possible homicides. Of course he is. That doesn't make him a serial killer. If you're wanting,
thank you, Frankie Love,
a profile case like this, and you're arrested, the police wouldn't be doing their jobs if they weren't also going back, looking at other unsolved cases to see if any parts of those cases match parts of this case, and then see if they could tie you to it. That's their job. That's literally what they do for a living. This isn't breaking news that they're doing that. The breaking news is when they find that case, right? So we all understand this, right? It's not breaking news that they're looking for other cases. The breaking news is when they find it, when they find a case and they say, he might be connected to this case. That's a big deal. Even if they don't tell us which case, if they say, we found a case he may be connected to also, that's a big deal. That's breaking news, but it's not breaking news that they're looking for it. But then right after that, we get the breaking news that he had one of the ID cards of a resident of 1122 King Road, which is where this tragedy took place at. But I found it very interesting that they said resident. I think it's weird, right? Like, why not say victim? If he had one of the victim's IDs, if he took a trophy with him, everybody watched Dexter on Netflix, right? If you're a true crime junkie and you didn't watch Dexter, what are you doing with your life? You're completely out of bounds here. You need to go binge it right now. In my mind, that's where I tie Bryan Kohberger to. He wanted to be part of law enforcement while pulling off crimes like this. That's if he's guilty. We're assuming here, but I mean, there's a lot about it, and it just drives me crazy.
Jada, hey sis. Happy Easter. I'm glad you had a good weekend.
Beyond a reasonable doubt yet. Maybe not, because we don't know what's true and what's not. So that's why we have to presume him innocent. But we can't go around playing dumb and acting like, okay, the fact that he followed him on Instagram, that he ripped the pictures, that he messaged multiple times, that he left his house right before, that his phone had no service right before and then came back on right after. He's driving the same car. His tag not there on the front when everybody else in Idaho and Washington would have tags on the front of their car, but he wouldn't because he's from Pennsylvania. Then you have how weird he is, his profile. Then you go back to Pennsylvania and they're watching him and he's putting his trash in other people's containers trying to keep his DNA from being found, to the point they couldn't find his DNA. They had to use his dad's DNA to match it to the sample that they found as being the father of. Then when they did go in to finally arrest him, he's in the kitchen at 4 o'clock in the morning with rubber gloves on, digging through the trash, separating anything he might have had that had his DNA on it. There is so much pointing that he may be guilty. And then we don't know what they have as far as what's on his phone records, what's on his social media records. We don't know that stuff. So we can't say that it is something. That's something I push back forever. You can't say that there is something there and we just assume it to be there, but it's possible it could be there. And if you take everything we already know and you line that up, yes, of course, he looks guilty. How does he not look guilty to you? How do you feel like there's nothing pointing to Bryan Kohberger? Now, I get it. I get it. If you say that he's being framed, if you say that they're planting evidence, and then we got the Brady Giglio stuff coming out about a cop who may not be trustworthy, may have done something in this case or another case, and that he worked on this case. I completely understand those conspiracies. I do. I really get it. And I mean, it happens. It's not like it drives me crazy with people on the other side of that who act like it couldn't be something crazy or it couldn't be dirty police work, because we know it happens. It happens on a regular basis. Like I said, there's almost 400 million people in this country all living a day-to-day life, and shit happens. You might stumble into a situation where something like that is happening, but the odds of it are low, right? So if you're going to tell me that Bryan Kohberger is being set up, that he's being framed, show me some evidence for that. Give me reasons to believe that, rather than I just don't trust it. I just have a gut feeling, because that's ridiculous, right? Logic over emotions. Remember, we go that route. Anyway, the IDs. This was sent back on a report, right? When we got his arrest report and all that from Pennsylvania, when all that was released, we saw this picture right here, and it said this. And everybody was confused because they thought it was like 10 curls in a glove in a box, right? But in reality, it says ID cards in glove in box. It doesn't say in glove box. I know a lot of people have that kind of mystery. Like, oh, well, if he had his ID in the glove box, what's the big deal? No. He had ID cards in a glove in a box. Now, this goes back to the Dexter Morgan stuff, right? Dexter on Netflix again. He kept his little shoebox full of trophies from his victims. That's a serial killer, right? Now, we don't know that Bryan Kohberger is a serial killer. We have no reason to suspect that he's killed anybody outside of this, but there are little hints to like, well, he acted this way, and then suddenly he had a boost of confidence and changed his whole life around at this age. That could be just teen growing pains. It could have had some significant event, like he took the life of somebody for the first time, right? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know that he's innocent or guilty. But when we talk about this, we can't just bounce around and say, well, we don't know this and we don't know that. We're talking about what we do know, right? And if he had ID cards of a victim, then that's a trophy. But if he had ID cards stuck in a glove, stuck in a box of one of the residents that were not a victim, aka Dylan Mortensen or Bethany Funk, then what does that tell us? Does that tell us that they were the target? Does that tell us that he might have had a relationship with them? He might have known them. They could have been friends. It could have been not out of the ordinary for him to be at that house. Maybe it could tell us that he could have been hanging out with Dylan Mortensen on the second floor and got into it with Ethan and Xana, right? Maybe he had to kill them two and then go upstairs and kill the other two who knew he was there. Maybe, right? I mean, that's where we put on our tinfoil hat right there, and we get into the conspiracies. But we have no reason to believe that yet. But as evidence comes out, maybe we will. Remember, Dylan Mortensen wasn't being attacked because she was a victim. She was being questioned about online because she's on the same floor that two of these murders took place on. She didn't hear that, but she heard all this little nonsense. Supposedly, she sees this man after the murders had been committed walking out the door and was close enough to notice his bushy eyebrows and his build. Yet she didn't see the big knife he had to be carrying since he didn't have a sheath. She didn't see the blood that would have been all over him since he just committed 4 horrific murders and a speed run record. How, right? Then she goes back in there and either sits in her bedroom for 8.5 hours or just goes to sleep and then wakes up, and then somebody else comes over and discovers the body, and then they call 911. Really? That's why Dylan was being questioned. That's the whole point of Dylan being questioned. So if Dylan's ID is now somehow in Bryan Kohberger's property, now we got questions, right? Maybe it's not just, oh, well, he took a trophy. Maybe it's not just, oh, he wanted to go after Dylan, but he got the wrong 4. Maybe not, especially seeing that Dylan opened the door and saw him on his way out. Wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it? Would it? No, sirree. So if he had Dylan Mortensen's ID, we got a lot of questions to be answered. Why do I make such a big point about that? It doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't call it one of the victims' IDs. The point of saying it was a resident of 1122 King Road and not saying one of the victims at 1122 King Road, that there's such a big difference in my mind. There's zero reason not to call them victims. Zero. It's absolutely nothing. It doesn't frame Bryan Kohberger in no sort of bad way, and they are victims. So if it was one of their IDs, then it would only make sense to say he had one of the victims' IDs. The fact that they used resident means that they didn't want to count out the roommates. Now, if you were going to say that whose ID it was, and it wasn't one of the victims, but it was one of the roommates, and you pointed that out and said, oh, he had Dylan Mortensen's ID, or oh, he had Bethany Funk's ID, what would the internet say? what would people start saying? How big would the conspiracy theories get about that? How often would Dylan be attacked? What would people think about it? What do you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. If he had one of the roommates' ID, is there a reason for him not to say that? I think there is. I think that if they come out and said that they found Dylan Mortensen's ID in Bryan Kohberger's car in a glove in a box, that everybody would go wild, saying that Dylan knew him, that Dylan knew it happened, that Dylan had him over and she let him in. That's exactly what would happen, right? And they want to avoid that. They don't want to put their witnesses in harm's way. They don't want to put their investigation at jeopardy by letting information leak out that doesn't make a lot of sense to the natural public, right? It just, they wouldn't. They would want to cover that up. Same thing with if it was Bethany Funk. So if it's not a victim's ID, then they would say a resident. That way you can't exclude the victims. But if it was a victim's ID, they would definitely say victim, because that paints a completely different picture. If he had Kaylee's ID, then obviously Kaylee was a target for him, and he went to that target, and then he discovered Maddie in the same room, and then he discovered Ethan and Xana coming back down, but Kaylee was his target. Now, I don't believe that. I believe Maddie was his target, but just an example. Now, if he had Dylan's ID, that sets up everything else. We already have all the drug theories that include Dylan and her boyfriend. We have the hit for hire that include Dylan and her boyfriend. We have the, oh, well, she described him, but she didn't say she knew him. In the damn arrest affidavit, it literally said that. Go back and look at what it said. It didn't say that she didn't know him. It said she didn't immediately say that she knew him. So if he had her ID, whoa, mind blown. What do you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to see more. Hit that notification bell so you get notified anytime I post. Have a great day. Have a happy Easter. Hit that like button. I'll see you next time. What's going on, guys? Hope everybody.
Okay, that's all on that for today. There's an update. Are y'all still here? Thank y'all for listening. I just think that's interesting. He said Kaylee's ID, and then he found Maddie in the same bed. I don't believe that was Kaylee's and found Maddie in the same bed, because they were in Maddie's bed. So, of course, Maddie would be in that bed. But, yeah, I agree with him on a lot of stuff. He's got some good points. He is a little conspiracy, but we all are a little bit sometimes. I don't know if y'all remember the Anna Walsh case out of Boston a while back, where they that weird guy, looks like the guy from Home Alone, killed his wife. Here goes my little Rugrats. But, I'm going to play a little update on that, because I've been following that, you know. Hold on a minute. Let me get these little brats. All right, here they are. But I'm going to play a little, well, it's a few minute update and on that. Okay, let's see, let's get it going here.
An active search for a Massachusetts mom of 3 who mysteriously vanished after leaving for D.C. She hasn't been seen since New Year's Day.
What happened at that house in Cohasset on New Year's, the morning of New Year's, we don't know.
She was in every way, shape, or form this full of life human being.
Right now, it's a missing persons investigation. Whether she just needed a little break or a timeout. We're just looking for her.
When a phone has been shut off for a few days, it's concerning.
Hairs were standing on the back of their neck when they first arrived at his house on January 4th.
The husband of the Massachusetts woman missing since New Year's Day, now formally charged with her murder.
He's probably the stupidest murderer who's ever walked the face of the planet Earth.
Anna Walsh, a mom of 3 young boys, goes missing from her Massachusetts home early New Year's Day. She was said to be heading here to Washington, D.C. because of a work emergency. She worked for realty firm Tishman Speyer. Now her husband is charged with her murder, even though her body has never been found. Tonight, we'll take you through Anna's life and what prosecutors say happened in those early morning hours.
She was living the American dream. Right? Immigrated from a war-torn country, came here, got a job, was working to support herself and her family.
Anna Walsh grew up in Serbia before coming to the U.S. in 2005. Reports say she worked her way up in the hospitality industry in New York City, where she met her future husband, Brian Walsh.
She's just so personable. She lights up a room.
After New York, Anna also worked in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Massachusetts. And while we know details of her professional career, little is known about her relationship with Brian. We spoke with reporter Bob Ward from Boston 25.
That's one of the mysteries here, that their friends that are here in Massachusetts aren't really saying a whole lot to us, and about their relationship. I uncovered a report in Washington that showed in 2014 that she complained to police that he threatened to kill her and a friend.
Anna reported to DC police that her then boyfriend told her over the phone that he was going to kill her and her friends.
There was a record of him threatening to kill her. And that is a huge red flag.
That report doesn't name Brian Walsh, but states that her boyfriend was living in Massachusetts, where Brian was living at the time. Anna never cooperated with DC police, and the case was closed.
A typical follow-up would be have to connect with the victim and get more information. And it appears that she did not want to follow through. Not unusual in domestic violence cases.
More than a year later, Brian and Anna were engaged. Just months after that, they were married. And the year after the couple welcomed their first child, Anna posted to social media a photo of herself with a black eye. In the post, Anna said she had a mild concussion, a bruised hip, and a cut. She appeared to brush it off to friends in the comments, blaming a fall at work. The picture has never been linked back to any sort of domestic violence, and the couple would go on to have 2 more children.
I mean, her kids were her whole world. Whenever she's with them, it's all about them.
Despite living in Cohasset, Massachusetts, Anna began working in DC at Tishman Speyer last year.
And I knew they were struggling because she's been far away for so long. I knew she, they had many fights about when are we finally going to come to DC? When am I going to be with my kids? That was her priority.
It was employees at Tishman Speyer that first reported Anna missing on January 4th.
My friend Jem called me and said, Anna's missing. And the first reaction is what are you talking about? Anna's missing.
Peter says that friend Jem was at Anna and Brian's home New Year's Eve, ringing in the new year, just a short time before investigators would later say she was killed. Initial reports say a family member told police that she left at 4 a.m. on January 1st to catch a flight to DC for a work emergency.
It's been reported that she was called to DC to handle some type of emergency at one of the properties that she manages. That's why she was attempting to go to DC early. She did have a flight booked for the 3rd, but she never got on that flight.
She would not have left on New Year's Day for a work emergency. So I think I pretty immediately knew in my gut that was not the case. And so it was just sort of this doesn't add up.
According to investigators, Anna's cell phone was turned off on January 2nd.
It's very difficult, as you know, nowadays not to leave an electronic footprint or some type of footprint, which are debit cards or your credit cards. And none of these things have been active since the first of the year.
Anna is the kind of person to respond. Again, given the extent of what she's doing in the day, she might not respond right away, but she does respond. When a phone has been shut off for a few days, it's concerning.
Police say Brian was cooperating in the early days of the investigation into Anna's disappearance.
Whether, she just needed a little break or a timeout, we're just looking for her.
A retired homicide detective who is not involved in the case says he thinks police knew all along.
It's my belief that the police were onto him from the get-go. They made some startling observations of the car before they even knocked on the door.
Brian first told investigators he hadn't seen his wife since...
Hello, geeking me out. Welcome.
...with his son. But as police continued to investigate, they obtained a search warrant for the family home, which led to Brian in handcuffs.
Brian Walsh is sloppy. Like he's making errors at every turn.
Brian was convicted of federal wire fraud charges in an unrelated case for selling fake Andy Warhol paintings and was awaiting sentencing. As part of his probation, he was wearing an ankle monitor.
His story did not match up with that electronic evidence, his electronic footprint. And at that point, there has to be red flag. I'm sure.
Do you think that may have played into effect when it came to the arrest for him misleading the investigation?
Absolutely.
Brian was charged with misleading police after investigators searched the home. For the first time since Anna's disappearance, the world saw Brian at his arraignment.
The images showed him actually smiling or smirking. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And he walked in with an air of arrogance, kind of looking around the courtroom, kind of looking like he owned the place. And I don't know, maybe thinking he could talk his way out of it.
You know, this is a serious situation, and he looked just casual. And I think it's you know, especially someone loving Anna so much, it's really difficult to see that and to understand that altogether. It doesn't make any sense.
With Brian now behind bars, investigators begin to piece together what they say happened to Anna Walsh. Still ahead on this Fox 5 special, the evidence collected by investigators inside that home and the haunting details revealed inside the courtroom.
How could something so horrific happen to such a beautiful human being?
If he did this, it would be smart for him to come clean.
It is a absolutely crushing circumstantial case.
You could hear a pin drop as the prosecutor went from Google search to Google search to Google search to Google search.
Welcome back. Brian Walsh now behind bars for misleading police in the investigation into his wife's disappearance. Anna still has not been found a week after she went missing. During his arraignment for that charge, prosecutors reveal they found blood and a knife in the basement of the couple's home in Cohasset.
Cohasset is a wealthy town on the ocean. It's very well known. Nothing like this happens there.
During that court appearance for the charge of misleading police, we learned that Brian lied about taking his son to get ice cream. Prosecutors say instead, surveillance images show he was buying hundreds of dollars worth of cleaning supplies at Home Depot.
I believe he did clean up, but you can never clean up good enough.
It is almost impossible to clean something well enough that forensic evidence would be actually taken care of.
On the day of his arraignment, police were searching a dumpster in nearby Peabody, near Brian's mother's home.
Investigators recovered 10 trash bags. Inside the trash bags, many of these items contained stains consistent with blood.
Among the things they found were blood-soaked towels and rags, a hacksaw, Anna's COVID card, and a necklace and pair of boots similar to the ones Anna was last seen wearing. A week later, and nearly 2 weeks after Anna's disappearance, Brian was charged with killing her.
So he proved that Brian Walsh dismembered Anna Walsh and discarded her body.
A much different reaction from Brian at this arraignment.
He was very quiet. It was very serious what was being revealed in that courtroom.
As prosecutors laid out their case, evidence shows a slew of disturbing searches made on his son's iPad just hours after Anna was last seen alive.
5 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm a body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit. At 6:34 a.m. on the 1st, can you throw away body parts? At 9:29 a.m., what does formaldehyde do? At 9:34 a.m. on the 1st, how long does DNA last? At 9:59 a.m., can identification be made on partial remains? At 11:34 a.m., dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. At 11:44, how to clean blood from wooden floor. At 11:56 on the 1st, luminol to detect blood. At 1:08, what happens when we put body parts in ammonia? At 1:21 p.m., is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? Those were on the January 1st.
Prosecutors say Brian didn't stop there. The next day, he's accused of searching things like, is a hacksaw the best tool to dismember a body? And can you identify a body with broken teeth? The day after that, more searches, including what happens to hair on a dead body and what is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on the surface in the woods.
He Googled how to dismember a 115-pound body, and his wife was 115 pounds.
I have never seen a defendant do that many Google searches. Never. It was 3 days worth of not just Google searches, but incriminating and damning Google searches.
She just kept going, and every search was worse than the one before.
Prosecutors also say just days before Anna's disappearance on December 27th, Brian searched online, what's the best state to divorce for a man?
I've been doing this for almost 40 years, and I've never seen that level of detail unleashed at an arraignment.
Brian Walsh pleaded not guilty.
Defendant will be held without bail pending indictment.
The question remains, where is Anna Walsh?
I think the investigators believe that she was disposed of in the trash and then incinerated, and they were just too late to get to it.
Still ahead in this Fox 5 special, will the circumstantial evidence be enough?
She's such a bright light in the world, and just, it's not fair what happened. And she does not deserve this.
It's surreal. It really is. It's like, it just people don't do this to one another, especially a husband to a wife, supposedly.
It's also so sad. Young woman, mother of young children. It's gruesome, and it's just a really hideous set of facts.
I think juries are sophisticated enough to know that if someone's if someone is being charged with murder, they're also capable of disposing the body.
Welcome back. Brian Walsh now charged with his wife Anna's murder. He pleaded not guilty and her body still has not been found. Investigators believe he dismembered her and took her and her belongings to different dumpsters starting on January 3rd.
He walks to the dumpster carrying a garbage bag. He's leaning, and it appears to be heavy as he has to heft it into the dumpster. He walks to the dumpster with the garbage bag and leaves it. On 448, we hit another complex in Abington, and at 5:10 p.m., cell phone shows records at another apartment in Brockton.
The next day, on January 4th, police do a welfare check on Anna after coworkers report her missing. During that check is when officers notice Brian's car. Prosecutors say the seats were down inside of his Volvo and there was a plastic liner in the back of the car. Then on January 5th, prosecutors say cell phone data shows him traveling to his mother's home.
The phone traveled to the complex where his mother lives at 9:30 a.m., went for about 5 minutes around the building to the southeast corner. In the southeast corner of that complex is where there was a dumpster. The dumpster was later secured and searched.
While prosecutors were able to secure some of the items Brian allegedly disposed of, it was too late for others.
These bags and what was in them were already picked up and taken to a location for shredding and being incinerated.
He's probably the stupidest murderer who's ever walked the face of the planet Earth. He has made every textbook mistake possible at every single turn. He is not given any thought to how to actually carry out the perfect murder. If there were a case study on how to commit the worst murder possible, he would be the poster boy for that.
Without a body, is there still a likelihood of this moving forward, a case like this?
I believe so, especially this case, yes. There are challenges, don't get me wrong.
It's a hard case for the prosecution because they don't have a body. And while it's not an impediment to getting a conviction for murder without a body, they still haven't recovered a body in the case, and that presents some challenges for the prosecution.
Duncan Levin is a former federal prosecutor. He says that even though a case without a body can be difficult, the state in this case has what it needs.
Just the overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence here, the cleaning supplies he bought, it was such a sloppily carried out murder that it's very overwhelming, and that's enough. That's all that the state needs to prove against him.
Most criminal cases are made with circumstantial evidence, and it's not unusual for convictions to be had with solely using circumstantial evidence. So that's not I don't believe that's a hurdle as much as people believe it to be, especially with the abundance of circumstantial evidence in this case.
That overwhelming circumstantial evidence is what Brian's defense team will need to overcome.
The defense is going to seize upon the fact that there's no body. And without that, you can't convict for murder because you don't know that she didn't just run away. The problem for the defense is that there are so many different threads here that all point in the direction of Brian Walsh that it's going to be very difficult for them to individually attack them.
If he did this, it would be smart for him to come clean. And somehow, for his kid's sake, fess up to it, right? Because essentially they've lost two parents. No matter what comes from this, they've lost both parents.
She always described him as her best friend, that they were very close, like love at first sight. That was always what she said, that she trusted him, that, anything he may have done wrong in the past. Maybe it was just bad choices. She was a good person. And it's sort of like knowing that now it's jarring, it's gut wrenching, it's uncomfortable to even think that like someone who's appears so calm and collected could, be capable of something you just don't expect.
Lots of times we find abusers to be incredibly charming.
I don't think that she ever thought she was in danger. And if she did, I don't know that she would have reached out to somebody.
So if she were buying a house in DC and thinking about moving the kids, that is a time where domestic violence might escalate, because that's the time of separation.
So I think when this opportunity came up as well, she jumped at it as well to be here and to move out of the Boston area. The other part of that really was, with Brian's ongoing investigation. I don't know how much I really want to talk about that. With the FBI, was that she was responsible for being the primary breadwinner. And so it was really a matter also of like her taking that on for her family.
Domestic violence cuts across every category you can think of: economic, racial, religious, any group, education level, anything, it cuts across.
If anything good can come from this, is to help the next person or persons who might be in this situation, or to have the ability to get help.
I think if more people start to realize that she, who, as you described, was successful and seemed good on the outside, can also be affected by domestic violence. And so don't look at yourself as, oh, I'm a strong, smart woman. How could this be happening to me? It happens to people across every economic divide.
She was strong. She was confident. She was powerful and wonderful, and an amazing mother. An amazing mother.
An amazing mother. That's how all of Anna's friends describe her. Still ahead, the message Anna's friends have for her children. Stay with us.
As a mom, she's just so attentive and loving and fun, playful. Like, she has 3 boys, so they play a lot and they had a lot of fun together. And she was just very present with them.
Anna would want her kids to continue the legacy of her life, right? The legacy of her life has to live on, and whatever that looks like. So she'll want her kids to do that. She'll want her kids to know.
It's not clear who is now caring for Anna and Brian's young children. Initial reports said they were in the custody of Child Services, but there has been some speculation that they could be with Brian's mother. Anna's mother lives in Serbia. Her friends say she visited her mom in December. Anna's mother spoke to Fox Digital, saying Anna texted her just 1 week before she vanished, asking her mom to come to the U.S. the very next day. Her mother was not able to make that quick trip. As for Brian, his case is still making its way through the courts. We'll continue to follow it for you right here on Fox 5. If you or anyone you know is experiencing domestic violence, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jacqueline Matter.
Spring Valley in the mid-1990s was...
Give me just 1 second, y'all. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, that's sad though about Anna, isn't it? Bless her heart. Hey, sis. Happy Easter, everyone. I'm so happy for you, Cher. Yeah, look, Squid, everybody wants to trash her and shit, and they didn't know what was going on off of YouTube, you know, and that she's got a job and been working. What can they say now about you, sis? Nothing. You go, love. I'm so fucking proud of you. I really am. I've watched you over what, 3, 4, I think it's been closer to 4 years and maybe. And you've grown so much. And thank you, sis, for loving me and believing in me like you do. I love you. Truly, Squid. Yeah, y'all my OGs. Shay, are we going to do another live like tomorrow or something maybe in the afternoon? Because I thought we was going to finish discussing some Tim Mullen stuff and all that. And I kind of enjoyed being on a panel as a guest instead of the creator. You know what I mean? It's different. It's a lot more chill for me. But, man, I'm scrackly. That's about all I had for today. I wanted to do that about the IDs, and then I wanted to do that about Anna Walsh. And I'm going to jump off here and get me a bite to eat and take my babies for a walk and all that. Be sure to check out the giveaway I'm doing. And if you share the giveaway to your community wall, you get a second entry, but just come back to the post, the giveaway post, and put on there that you shared. And I will check for people that want to be snakes. But I'm really excited for this giveaway, and I want everybody to have a chance and some protection. But thank you all for joining me. I love you. We'll talk tomorrow, maybe on shares, maybe here. We never know. But I'm going to make her go live tomorrow. I love you all, and good night.